One of the biggest remaining questions in the Denver sports scene this summer has finally been answered as the Denver Nuggets have made multiple hires to complete their front office. But did they make the right ones? And how does the blockbuster trade in the NBA that sends Kevin Durant from the Phoenix Suns to the number 2 seed Houston Rockets impact the Western Conference? All things to come on today's rundown, but we will begin over at Ball Arena, where we finally have an answer as to who is going to be the next general manager, I guess, of your Denver Nuggets. This comes after the obvious dismissal of Michael Malone and Calvin Booth that took place late in the season, last season, back in April. And there was speculation about would it be an interim promote from within candidate, as has been the case for the Denver Nuggets, who typically don't tend to overspend or overreach in the executive department of their front office. They didn't want to overpay to keep Masai Ujiri, who had experienced success in that role. Tim Connolly doesn't get the same treatment, gets a Godfather offer from the Minnesota Timberwolves that watches him leave town, all of which were internal promotions of the next, including Calvin Booth, who was dismissed alongside the winningest head coach in franchise history in Michael Malone. And now the interim replacement for Calvin Booth, Ben Tenzer, does maintain the role, but it's a little bit different than we maybe did expect. It's not a surprise, I should say, that no external candidate was hired, because as far as we know, no external candidate was really interviewed, or if so, it was done quietly enough that even the prying eyes and ears of Shams Charania and other NBA insiders were not able to catch a whiff of it. So Ben Tenzer gets promoted from interim GM to become executive vice president of basketball operations. And then John Wallace is the outside hire that is brought in from the Minnesota Timberwolves, who left the Denver Nuggets to follow Tim Connolly to Minnesota. He comes back to be hired as executive VP of player personnel. Here's a statement coming out in real time from the Denver Nuggets. It says the following, quote, "As we sought to reimagine the Nuggets front office, we are excited to kick off the work for the upcoming season with Ben and John leading the way," stated Josh Kroenke. Ben did a terrific job leading the organization as interim general manager during a challenging stretch, and it was clear during that time that he had earned the respect of our players, coaches, staff, and peers. In spending time with John, his leadership, quiet confidence, and relationship-oriented mindset stood out, and we are excited to bring such a fast-rising executive back home to Denver. We are eager to pair these leaders alongside our coaching staff to pursue another Larry O'Brien trophy that our fans so richly deserve. That is coming from the mouth of KSE Vice Chairman Josh Kroenke, with the endorsement of team owner and governor E. Stanley Kroenke. And I have a little bit of a question about this hire. And my question is this. By deciding, as the Nuggets announced in the early hours this morning, to hire 2 people to essentially fulfill the vacated role left by Calvin Booth, does that automatically flag that perhaps they didn't have the right candidate, quote unquote, available at their disposal? You're hiring essentially 2 people to do one job by splitting the role of general manager into 2 different facets: executive vice president of basketball operations and executive vice president of player personnel. Those are 2 different sides of the typical NBA GM role that are now being specialized for 2 young up-and-coming interim candidates. So did the Denver Nuggets, in hiring 2 guys, essentially flag that they maybe don't have the right guy? And I do question that. I'm thinking back, I'm channeling my inner Oscar Martinez in The Office when he said, name a country that has 2 presidents, or a boat that sets sail with 2 captains, or where would the Catholic Church be without the popes, plural? And it kind of feels like that's my initial gut reaction to these hires by the Denver Nuggets. We will remain to be seen and wait and see how things play out. And it turns out Ben Tenzer was clearly busy on the phones, as a dark horse candidate in the Kevin Durant sweepstakes that the Denver Nuggets were, as reported by Shams Charania. But I focus things under the lens of where the Nuggets are at as a franchise, just a few years removed from winning their first title in the history of the organization, and balancing the prime years of Nikola Jokic, who, although he was not awarded the MVP in favor of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and they did not win another title or return back to an NBA Finals or even a Western Conference Final, it does remain to be seen how the team is going to manage these very critical, important years of Nikola Jokic's prime, where you have the best player in the world at dribbling a basketball and playing the game of basketball, plays for your team in your city, and has been loyal and faithful to your organization. And these remaining seasons are so vital to the future trajectory of this franchise that every single move, whether it's the hiring of a general manager, the decision to hire a new head coach, free agency and roster decisions, trades and draft capital, all of these things should be scrutinized with such a fine-tooth comb and to such a degree that there leaves no doubt and no stone unturned that the moves that are being made are made with that gravity in mind. And hiring David Adelman to replace the winningest head coach in franchise history. Yes, he's a long-time assistant. Yes, he has already familiarity and continuity built in with the players in the locker room. And some of those players were campaigning for his hire to take place before it was made official. And then promoting from within and bringing in an outside assistant to kind of split this role and tackle the GM from two different ways in specialized fashion. I just am nervous that these moves are not being made with the full urgency and certainty that I think the situation requires. It's only the first day officially on the job for these two. The NBA draft is just a couple of days away. So it sounds like things are going to hit the ground running pretty quickly over at Ball Arena, and we will be alongside to catalog it as it goes throughout the remainder of this offseason. On the eve, I should say the morning of the end of the NBA season, the day of Game 7, we got one of the bigger blockbuster trades in recent NBA fashion, as Kevin Durant was sent from the Phoenix Suns, who he joined just over 2 seasons ago, in another blockbuster trade. Anything involving Kevin Durant moving teams is going to be labeled as a blockbuster. He moves from the Brooklyn Nets to the Phoenix Suns for a massive haul that included Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, and several first-round picks, unprotected first-round picks. He now gets traded by those Phoenix Suns, who gave up a king's ransom to the reigning number 2 seed in the Western Conference, Houston Rockets, who give up a young member of their core in Jalen Green, a solid role player in Dylan Brooks, the number 10 overall pick in this upcoming NBA draft, just 48 hours from now, and 5 second-round picks. So without getting too into the nuance and the weeds of the fact that the Suns gave up a king's ransom to get Kevin Durant and get back a significantly smaller haul, in this person's opinion, to send him to the Rockets, who don't have to give up any real member of their star core to acquire KD, and are already the number 2 seed in the West. So how does this move shake the landscape of the Western Conference, which, again, our Denver Nuggets are going to have to navigate and battle through as they continue a quest for a second Larry O'Brien trophy? Well, it's certainly not getting any easier. Phoenix may be playing themselves a little bit out of the contention phase and more toward a rebuild. But just as Kevin Durant has oddly done many times in his career, he now, as a 37-year-old who's still one of the better shooters in today's game, and certainly in NBA history, if you want to take his entire career into catalog, moves to a ready-to-contend and built now ready-to-win team in the Houston Rockets, who also have youth on their side with the likes of Amen Thompson and Fred VanVleet and others who are composing, I should say, a pretty significant core there in Houston. And I just think it's another reminder of what the Nuggets are unable to do. And up until this morning weren't really prepared to do in an official capacity, and that is manipulate and maneuver the offseason in a way that keeps them shifting at the pace of the teams in the Western Conference around them. The Oklahoma City Thunder are now NBA champions. Their young core is set, and they appear to be set up to build that dynasty over the next handful of seasons. The Houston Rockets don't have the same setup in terms of youth and contract structure, but they have shades of that, and they now bring in one of the better players in the history of the NBA to kind of help push them over the top and avoid the upset like they saw by the 7-seeded Golden State Warriors. And the Nuggets, conversely, have none of the things that those two teams have. They don't have quality youth and depth like the Oklahoma City Thunder. They have the best player in the world, Nikola Jokic. They have one of the better, I believe, core 4 players in the NBA, but they've sunk 82+% of their salary cap flexibility into that core 4. And then the young players that they have budding around them in Christian Brown and Peyton Watson, who are both going to be eligible for extensions in the very near future, the path toward maintaining that core and keeping those players is very, very murky. Made even more complicated by a subject that we'll get into on tomorrow's show, which is the picking up of the option, the player option by Dario Saric, which is going to take another $5.4 million off the books for Denver and push them closer to that second apron that they're trying to avoid. And we'll see what they do with the mid-level exception. But I'll summarize it and say this. The Western Conference in the NBA is shifting, and it is building at an alarmingly fast rate. The Oklahoma City Thunder, the reigning champions in the NBA, who, yes, the Denver Nuggets took to 7 games, but that was the end of their journey, don't appear to be going anywhere anytime soon. The Houston Rockets now add Kevin Durant, and the number 2 seed from last year gets even stronger. So the Nuggets, who were fighting to keep that top 4 seeding in the postseason, and we watched how much it took them to push the LA Clippers to the brink and then turn around and do the same thing with the Thunder, who were, the Nuggets were also battling health and injuries and depth concerns and dealing with the firing of your coach and all of that. But that's showbiz, baby, because the Western Conference in the NBA is getting better. And the Nuggets, it is imperative that they take whatever means necessary to keep pace with these other teams and to develop and build on what they have available in front of them. Because if they don't, we will continue to watch an erosion, both from a talent perspective and from a record perspective of this Nuggets team until we look back and finally realize it's too late to do anything about it. So the upcoming offseason for new Executive Vice President of Basketball Operations, Ben Tenzer, and new Executive Vice President of Player Personnel, John Wallace, is going to be very busy and very tense very fast. We will see how they choose to tackle it. More to come on tomorrow's show. Be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Denver Sports 1043. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, X, Facebook at DEN Sports 1043, and we will catch you tomorrow with the latest.
I do what I love what I do. Second nature to put it